Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live. Let me tell you, the dopamine, it's flowing.
I am damn excited. Damn excited.
That's a terrible drum roll.
Oh!
Boy, how you doing, man? Patrick.
Will, Sterling.
Yeah.
Super Bowl champion, two-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! And we'll see you next week, but until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast. This is the Intangibles brought to you by Arrowhead Addict. My name is Bryce Carter. Thank you so much for joining me today. We will have Christian in frame shortly. You have to be a little bit patient with us today as there he is. You have to be a little patient with us today as those of you who are not here in Kansas City on Monday afternoon, Monday evening, it's pretty rough weather-wise here. I'm looking at like marble-sized hail fall out my window right now. The winds are blowing, the storms are coming. So stay safe out there. Tornadoes, I know we like to joke here in the Midwest that tornado sirens mean go outside and watch it. But take this stuff seriously. You know, there were some pretty serious tornadoes in St. Louis this weekend. Had some friends who were caught up in there. I know you're a lot closer to some of the people on the St. Louis side from your college days, Christian. But storm season is no joke.
Oh, yeah, it gets really bad in my hometown as well. Like, I remember specifically just back whenever I was a little kid, there were 4 tornadoes around my small town of Concordia, Missouri, just circling kind of like dogs waiting to devour the city. Somehow we survived, so it's really nice. But yeah, no, maybe stay inside. No reason to traumatize yourself or your children with hanging out watching a tornado.
My wife is already kind of scared of storms. And then last Sunday night or Saturday night, we kind of unironically watched the movie Twisters, the new one, because it was free on Prime. And so she's like all in a tude now about these storms. Mm-hmm. So also, that was a pretty good movie. I love the fact that movie was about tornadoes and there was like a tornado on the screen for like 75% of the movie. No joking around here. We're just straight tornado content the whole time. And I'm here for it. Well, I'm really excited about today's show. This show is called The Intangibles. And when we set out to do this show, we took that term, the intangible, and wanted to take it in many different directions, from draft prospects when we're talking about character concerns, arm length, leadership, all those type of things, to the numbers, DVOA, EPA per play, those type of things. And then some of the stories that go outside of just the realm of sports. I would say probably my favorite thing about sports is the fact that it touches so many facets of life. It's culture, it's food, it's religion, it's race, it's cities, it's regionality. There's so many things to it that tie sports together. And, you know, you went to school in a big college town, Columbia. You can feel how having sports is kind of the heartbeat of a city like that. You know, college town's a term for a reason, and that's partially because of athletics. And today we're really going to cover a story that touches a lot of Kansas City sports right now, and that is the stadium issue here in Kansas City. For those of you that have been following along, this story's been going on for over a year now. Quite honestly, 3 or 4 years. This has been something that's been a slow, rumbling, growing beast in the background of Kansas City for quite some time. And now the issue's kind of reared its ugly head, and we've already seen some of this happen. And we'll try to cover this issue as both objectively and subjectively as we can. To help us do that here in a few minutes, we're going to have Jason Anderson from The Zone on Sports Radio 810. He is the other half of the show that our very own Sterling Holmes does from 10 to 2 every day on Sports Radio 810. They have done an excellent job of covering the stadium issue. I'm very passionate about it as someone who has lived in Kansas City my whole life, as someone who, you know, has spent many a night in Arrowhead, many a night in Kaufman. So we're going to try to cover that as deeply and as intensely as we can, while also still keeping it within an hour. So we'll do our best, because quite honestly, we could do 4 hours on this.
Oh yeah, 100%. And kind of an important point here before we get going, I am very much a newbie to this situation. Like, it's not something that I really kept up with 100% of the time. This was not like a major focus of, you know, my Chiefs radar. It wasn't on my Chiefs radar for a big portion of this offseason. So it'll be nice to hear you guys talk about it and learn a lot. I've got a lot of questions that I want to ask and get through once we get to that point. But
well, it's kind of funny. Like I was thinking about it. Me and you have known each other like long enough now that we like actually have like I've seen you come from being like kind of a college kid all the way into your adulthood, which makes me feel bad. But we talked about this for a little bit about like, gosh, how are we going to get Christian up to date on this issue to the point that he understands it, that he can talk about it with authority. And then at some point, I just realized, like, you know what? We just need to lean into the fact that Christian doesn't really understand this a lot. He's got a lot of questions because not every person who comes into the show cares about it as much as I do, or maybe Jason does. So today we're going to have Christian kind of lead the conversation, and he's just going to do like the idiot's guide to the stadium. And he's going to ask some really just simple questions, some of which might seem basic, but sometimes basic questions are really great. Last night I was laying in bed with my son as I was tucking him in, and he asked, Dad, am I alive? And I was like, yeah, buddy, you're alive. He's like, how do I know that I'm alive? And I was like, well, like you can feel, you can see, you can touch. And he's like, but what happens when I die? And I was like, look, dude, wars have been fought over this very question. Okay. So sometimes you get the most, like even a child can ask a question that is so simple, but ask a big response. So this is all to say that the child in the room, Christian, will attempt to ask questions and will attempt to answer them about the stadium.
Wow, thanks, Bryce. Way to equate me to your child's son.
Yeah, my 4-year-old. Yeah, you and my 4-year-old, lot in common.
Hey, listen, he might know just about as much about this as I do. So
it's
at this point,
it is possible.
Let's just keep leaning into it, and we'll get through it, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, so before we bring Jason on, we did want to talk a little bit about our new sponsor that we have, and it's actually I was actually really happy to see that they are joining us because I've been a fan of Factor meals for quite some time. My wife and I, we have 2 young kids. We like rarely, unfortunately, get to sit down and just eat a meal all together as a family. There's a lot of times that it's just grab and go. I'll eat something different than my wife does. We're making something different for the kids because they might not like what we're eating. So it's all hands on deck trying to eat around here. And for me, especially someone who's a little bit heavier set, I always struggle with trying to find something that's healthy, something that's good for me. I can't, like, if I serve myself the portions, I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to put too much on my plate. I'm going to mess up. But Factor meals, they do a great job of whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for meals that are high in protein, low carb, keto friendly, or if you're just looking for a delicious meal, Factor Meals is where you want to go to order that. Make this your season the best yet with nutritious 2-minute meals from Factors. Eating well has never been this easy. Just heat up and enjoy, giving you more time to do what you want. Get outside instead of prepping and cooking indoors. Factor Meals arrive fresh and ready to eat, perfect for any active lifestyle. With 45 weekly menu options, you can pick gourmet meals that fit your goals, choose from Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. It powers your day with satisfying breakfasts. That's a great one. Like breakfast is one of those things, like I'm usually a granola bar guy. You can have delicious, nice, filling breakfasts right to go on the go, lunches, premium dinners, guilt-free snacks, and desserts. It's easy to savor more this spring. Factor Meals pack in flavor with none of the fuss. One of my favorite things from Factor, it's a meal that I've gotten a couple of times. It is their delicious green chili chicken. It's got a little bit of a spice. It's with Mexican-style cauliflower, rice, and pepper, but it's got queso blanco on it. And what I like about it, really low carb, really high protein. So only 22 grams of carb, really delicious meal there. And you guys can get a 50% off on our Arrowhead Addict by using our promo code. That promo code is Arrowhead 50 off. Use the promo code Arrowhead 50 off, all one word, to get 50% off plus free shipping on your box. That's Arrowhead 50 at factormeals.com/Arrowhead 50 off for 50% off plus free shipping. So check out Factor Meals. Great to have them on. Great product that will really simplify your life. All right. So the stadium, where to begin? I think one thing before we get into Christian's questions is just, I think one thing that's really important to acknowledge when talking about the stadium issue is that there are no absolutes. We can talk about things in absolutes with sports. A guy's on base percentage is what it is. Patrick Mahomes didn't kind of throw 30 touchdown passes. He threw 30 touchdown passes. These stadium issues, they are not clear night and day. And anybody who's speaking in absolutes about what they think has happened or will happen or is going to happen or likely to happen, is likely talking out of the wrong end of their body, because frankly, it's confusing. And people who have followed the story much closer to me, like capital J journalist, they will tell you that this story is very multifaceted and there's a lot of parts to it. So I will do my best to be as objective as possible. We'll also be a little subjective because I can't help but give an opinion. But just keep in mind that there is no true one right answer in this instance.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And I think it's also important. There's like a lot of bureaucracy that goes around these types of things. So something that happens that we talk about right now could potentially change fairly rapidly. Like it could be something that it's a very fluid situation from what I understand. And so
this story has changed literally in the last week. Like
yes.
It went from being on the Missouri House of Representatives floor to the Missouri Senate not getting done during the general session, to Governor Mike Kehoe calling a special session, which will take place in June, to possibly get Missouri to vote on this issue. So it is ever evolving. So that's right. Just keep that in mind as we talk about this, because the last thing we need is like someone 3 months later being like, well, you guys said, and I was like, well, this is 3 months ago. Like that's forever with these type of issues.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, Christian. So I'm an open book. It's time for you to put on the big boy pants. You're a tax paying man now. You've got a career. It's time for you to start learning about these issues. And keep in mind too, this is Arrowhead Addict, but this is a Kansas City issue. Some of you guys don't live in Kansas City. That's awesome. We love the national fan base, but you do care where the Chiefs play. And you also care about the Chiefs making that sweet, sweet money, because that's what brings guarantees and contracts. That's what keeps Patrick Mahomes happy. It's all these things are good. So if we're talking about the Chiefs, the Chiefs Stadium one day holding the Super Bowl, or, massive concerts or SEC championships or whatever the sporting event is, that matters, and we can't have a Super Bowl here in Kansas City because of the weather. But if there were to be an indoor stadium, that'd be an option. And that makes the Chiefs money. And also keep in mind, not all of us are Royals fans, but this is a unique situation. Probably one of the only situations in the country that I can think of where two teams are or were tied together with their stadium issues. So we will be talking about the baseball team here a little bit too, but it does matter because I can tell you, it does not sound like these two teams want to be tied to the hip anymore. And if for some reason the Royals were to stay at Kauffman Stadium, Arrowhead Stadium would become much less interesting to the Chiefs, because that there cannot be a Chiefs and Royals game at the same time. That it's just not possible. We came close to that where the Royals were playing in Yankee Stadium in the playoffs when the Chiefs were playing the Saints last year, but those two schedules cannot overlap. They cannot cross paths because there's just not capacity for the city and for the venue itself. So we will talk a little Royals today. I apologize if you're not a huge Royals fan, but it does matter. So Christian, take it away.
All right, let's do it. So I have just a very, very general question to start this off. So Arrowhead has been Arrowhead for as long as I can remember. As a boy growing up, it's been the place to be. It's where the Chiefs are. It's where the Chiefs play. Why do we need a new stadium in the first place? Like, is this money related? I know that there's some complaints about like the facilities at Chiefs Stadium. Does it have to do with that too? Or is it just like a zoning type of logistics kind of thing?
So here's the thing. Do I think that and this is hard because we're getting into the objective subject thing already. Is Arrowhead like ready to expire? Is it going to crumble? This is something that's been brought up a lot with Kauffman Stadium. The Royals owner, John Sherman, has brought up this term called cancer of the concrete. These venues, I will say, they are pretty old. They have had several renovations. And if you literally think about them, this is hanging concrete way up in the sky. I do think that there is a need for a new venue or an updated venue for the Chiefs. I think that like they're making modifications to hold the World Cup in the coming year. They're making modifications to the field. And I do think also it's important to realize that this is also about keeping players happy. This is about trying to continue to be a competitive market. If we want things in Kansas City like Taylor Swift concerts or, some of these major like Morgan Wallen concerts or things like that, that they do need updating. Typically, something that's really important for this analysis too is remembering that all this cannot happen in the blink of an eye. If you want to renovate Arrowhead, that's going to take years. If you want to build a new baseball stadium, that's going to take 4 years at minimum. So this is not something that can be done overnight. So what does Arrowhead look like in 5 years from now is what the question needs to be. Is it still a place that is competitive with other NFL teams, for NFL free agents, for other concerts, other venues, etc.? So in a way, there is a new need for a renovated new version of Arrowhead to stay competitive with the market, etc.
Okay. So, but the renovations, they're not possible with the current situation, or it would just be super inconvenient to have them? Because I know some places, like, you have to, if you're going to renovate them, you have to shut them down. You have to, you can't do things in them for certain amounts of time. Like, is that the situation with Arrowhead? Is it that bad? Or is it like more of a, it's more convenient, it's more cost effective, maybe is the better term, to create a new stadium entirely?
Let's actually, we have now joining us from Sports Radio 810. We've got Jason Anderson. Jason, welcome aboard. Jason's show is The Zone, which is 10 to 2 every day on Sports Radio 810. More famously, the man who has to put up with Sterling Holmes every single day.
Yeah.
Jason, how you doing today, man?
I'm good now that I'm not around Sterling, so everything's great.
Yeah, well, this is the real reason we brought you on. So someone that can bash on Sterling with us. It's really the whole point we had you on. First off, how's the weather where you are? Are you holding up okay?
Yeah, we had a little bit of a flash with the power going off and on, but it's been steady for the last 20 minutes or so. So fingers crossed. But yeah, we had some hail run through. So right now, so far, so good.
Okay, cool. So what we're doing today a little bit, and I don't know if you caught it whenever you were in the green room, but Christian here, he is not the most educated when it comes to the stadium issue. So I was sitting here trying to figure out how can we get him to understand everything, but I realized his misinformation, his lack of information might actually be the best tool here. So he's going to ask us some really basic stadium questions that honestly might solicit some really good answers for us. So we'll try to be objective, and then at the end we'll get a little subjective about what we think should happen. So we're going to answer Christian's questions here, and if you think, like, 810 has done such a great job of covering this issue, I know Todd Lebo's done a great job, all the shows, SSJ in the morning, the program, you guys have all done a great job covering it. So if something I say is inaccurate, something, you just let me know. I've tried to do my best with it. So Christian, go ahead with your next question, man.
All right, cool. So I mean, there's talk of them moving to Kansas. I'm sure there are some spots in Missouri as well that they would move to. What would losing the Chiefs mean to Kansas City or Missouri, other than like the sentimental, like it would suck if they were gone? Like, what are they really losing or gaining for either side? Like, why is this such a coveted thing?
I would say one of the things that certainly the sentimental value is part of it. There are a few things that I think go into it when you have a team in your city/state. I think there's the value of being a pro city. I think there's the value of some of the intangible things. There's the value of attracting talent and keeping talent. And I don't mean like, professional athletes talent. So if Google or Amazon or Cerner or these companies that are located here in Kansas City want to attract talented workers and business people and business owners to Kansas City, if you're not hiring from the local pool of candidates that grew up in Kansas City, then are you attracting somebody that might be the best possible candidate that grew up in Denver or grew up in Indianapolis? And so, okay, is there something to do when you're there? So keeping talent, I think, is part of having professional teams in your city. That's the sort of intangible thing. I think some of the tangible things that are there are when we talk about the Royals and the Chiefs and what they will do with their leases, the CBA comes up, the Community Benefits Agreement, and that's a big part of whether it's for affordable housing, whether it's given back to underserved, whether it goes to, some public schools in the community. And what gets missed, I believe, is that, people were saying the 3/8 cent tax. I don't want to have that extended. Our tax dollars shouldn't go to the billionaires. Well, a couple of things. One, Jackson County owns the stadiums, but also I would be more in favor of that argument if you were willing to create a 3/8 cent tax that then went back to underserved areas of Kansas City. That 3/8 cent tax was then funneled from the Chiefs and the Royals to then public schools in Kansas City or parks or streets or affordable housing and things like that, to where the Community Benefits Agreement is a part of getting some local tax dollars your way. And if the Royals or the Chiefs leave Jackson County, that money is gone. The 3/8 cent tax is gone. Anything that they would give back to the community is gone. Anything around the area that may develop, which it hasn't, we know that, would be gone as well. But also, if it leaves the area overall, then you're talking about being left behind by some other cities and, sort of falling back to where we were in, 1970s or 80s, when I feel like Kansas City is a growing and booming area with the Chiefs, with the Royals, with Sporting, and these new stadiums that are being built, and getting the World Cup is huge.
Yeah, and I would say something too, like, we're talking like professionally, but also think about how much the stadiums impact people's jobs and lives on the daily basis that may not necessarily be associated with the teams. Yes, you have the people who are working the concessions, who are working in the parking lot, who are working the field, security, etc. But you also have people who, like, the jobs being where they are matter. So for instance, if you're a guy who drives for Uber on the side, you might not drive to the Kansas side to help with Ubering at the stadium games because it might be too far from you. Also keep in mind, a lot of these jobs are, I don't want to be disrespectful, but they're entry-level jobs that a lot of people may not have the best access to all the time. So the Metro runs to the stadiums, right? The Metro is not going to run to 135th and Quivira or whatever the Kansas roads are. I just made up a road. It's probably not a road. It's just how people in Kansas talk about
135th and Quivira is a road, and I'd like you to get out of my backyard, sir.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know that. I was just guessing. But anyways, I like another big one. I have a ton of friends who are cops and first responders. The amount of off-duty money that is made by police officers and first responders out at the stadiums, that would all change. If you're a Jackson County deputy or a Clay County deputy, you can work security out at those games, or a KCPD officer. If those games go across state lines, guess what? You don't get to do that because you're not your jurisdiction anymore, not in the same state, right? So that's money that's walking out the door for people that does impact, right? So this is loss of jobs. This is loss of, like you said, this is a state that's already lost one NFL team. And if you ask people in St. Louis how they feel about the Kroenke family or the Rams or those type of things, you're going to get a lot of upset people. And this is the state of Missouri is, potentially going to lose one major professional sports franchise, could potentially lose two. I don't think that that's likely. And, they already have, like, the Cardinals are ingrained in St. Louis. Obviously the I-70 series just happened. Like, if the Royals leave Kansas or leave Missouri for Kansas, like, you have one NFL team and one MLB team, and that's it. So, and losing the NFL exclusively from the state of Missouri will be huge. And let's not act like, too, sports gambling plays a part in this, right? Like, Kansas sports gambling is live on Kansas right now. It will eventually come in Missouri too. But how the revenue pulls in there and how these new stadiums are equipped with sports gambling, like, one of the things that was in the Chiefs proposal was increased Wi-Fi. You want to know why? Because they want you putting those parlays in, baby. So all those things tie into this, and it does matter. So, like, there are people who are not like us, who are not big sports people, who are going to look at the stadium issue and say this is just giving money to billionaires. And while that may or may not be true, the fact matters that this issue is much deeper than just filling the pockets of billionaires.
Okay, and that's good. That was going to be one of my upcoming questions as well. It's like, why are we shouldering this burden of paying for a billionaire stadium? But I think when you put it like that, I would kind of equate it to like the Mizzou sort of college town situation, right? I just graduated, like, I guess it's been about a year now. But it's like, during the summer, things aren't going on. You take that entire student population out of the buyers' potential for all these different companies and things that have set up shops there in Columbia, and it just kind of shuts down over the summer. I could definitely see a similar.
It's important to acknowledge too that the people of Jackson County spoke on this issue. The Chiefs and Royals put together a plan together that was going to bring an all new ballpark to to Crossroads in Kansas City, an all new Royal Stadium within walkable distance from Power and Light, and then a renovated Arrowhead Stadium. More than 58% of Jackson County voters turned that issue down. So to your point about, lining the pockets of billionaires, there were some very politically active groups here in Kansas City that were very outspoken about this issue. And Jason, I'll ask you this question. Do you think that the plan put forth specifically by the Chiefs was, for lack of a better term, tanking the vote? Or do you think that that's the best that they could do considering the stipulation of the two teams being together?
So I think it's interesting because I don't think the Chiefs want to be connected with the Royals, and I don't think the Royals want to be connected with the Chiefs. I think that relationship has, it's expired. I mean, it's gone on for so long that they're ready to split up and be on their own separate lease. And yes, the voters of Jackson County certainly did speak vote, and as widely and resoundingly as they turned it down, my thoughts on the vote at the time, and still the same, in that, if you want to make sure you're going to keep the Chiefs and Royals in Jackson County, that was the one time that you had for sure that you knew voting yes was going to do that. After that happened, then we don't know where the teams are going to go. Could go to Clay County, could go to Johnson County, could go to Wyandotte. We'll find out. I don't think they're going to leave the city, but I do believe John Sherman when he says that they will not be playing at Kauffman Stadium at 2030. So they'll be playing somewhere in 2030. Let's hope it's in the Kansas City area somewhere. And I don't care if that's in Kansas or Clay or Jackson, just as long as they're here. I don't think the Chiefs are leaving anytime soon. But I do think that, when those voters, came out in droves and said that we don't want to pay for this, I do think there was an element of people saying, well, I don't want to be threatened. I don't want to be told that, given, this ultimatum that you're either going to do this or we're going to leave. And while I do think that is somewhat of an argument, the fact of the matter is this wasn't if you vote for this, we'll stay. If you don't vote, we're going to Nashville, or we will be the San Antonio Royals, or we will be the San Antonio Chiefs if you vote no on this. That's different than you have no fear that the Royals or Chiefs are leaving the area. And to say that, well, we're not going to be told, that you have to do this, or, it's just not going to happen. Well, I don't really think that there was a threat there. I don't think there was a believable threat that the Royals or Chiefs would leave the area. And so if it gets to that, a believable threat, then I think a lot of things have certainly gone wrong along the way. But I do think there's, when the voters spoke up, they didn't want to give the money, quote unquote, to the billionaires, and didn't want to give the tax breaks to billionaires. But I mean, I'd like to see the same people and the same energy when there's land grants and there's tax cuts given to attract these large corporations that, hey, Amazon, you want to build a big assembly plant here? We'll give you the land. We'll give you the tax breaks. Well, that's tax money that could be coming in and could be used for roads and other things. So if that's not being used for that because you gave a tax break to them, well, then your tax dollars then would have to go to that, and instead of having a surplus. So by giving them that, the city is clearly seeing that there is some sort of a value in having this business in this area. Well, I'm sure Amazon and Google can afford the taxes on whatever property that they would be buying. But to attract them here, you have to give them incentives because another city will. And it's simply the price of doing business. Brock Purdy got paid by the 49ers, and that seems like the price of doing business for quarterbacks these days. Is it smart money? I don't know. We'll see what happens with the 49ers. But if Kansas City does not, quote unquote, give money to the billionaires for a stadium, another city will line up to say, we'll take the Chiefs, we'll take the Kansas City Royals and do that. It's just a matter of, do you want to be a pro town or not? I mean, I've always called it a pro tax that, people don't like it. Well, do you want to be a pro town? There's a pro tax that goes along with it. And if it comes over to Johnson County, that's fine. I grew up in Jackson County. I would have been paying it. Now I live in Johnson County. I'll pay it. I just want to make sure that the Royals and Chiefs don't go anywhere. I lived for 10 years in Louisville, and people may not realize that Louisville had a larger population in the 70s and 80s than Nashville and Indianapolis. But what happened? They didn't pay for the Kentucky Colonels to go to the NBA. They couldn't get the Vancouver Grizzlies to stay out of Memphis. They were fighting over the Charlotte Hornets to get to Louisville, and then the university stepped in and nixed the whole deal because they didn't want money going away from the university, and the Hornets went down to New Orleans. In the meantime, the Colts, the Pacers, the Titans, the Predators, all going north and south of Louisville and being surpassed. So there is a part of being a pro town that attracts people and continues to build. And now Indianapolis, and look at Nashville, and obviously it's become a big tourist city for a lot of different reasons. But, the Grand Ole Opry and being, the country music, capital of the country, in theory, had a chance to be Louisville, but they passed it up because they didn't want to have these other teams. They wanted just to stay the level that they were, and they still are. They're the largest city without a pro team, and they're not getting one anytime soon because they're landlocked. And that's sort of when people say, what's the value of having an NFL team? Well, I lived there for 10 years of what the value is if they would have had the Charlotte Hornets or the Grizzlies or would have been smart enough to work ahead of time to get an MLS team that Cincinnati ended up getting. Well, Cincinnati's an hour and a half up the road. They're not going to get an MLS team now. And that's just what you run into if you aren't progressively thinking. And that's an inverse sort of worst case scenario of this is an example of what happens when you turn down pro teams because you just want to be the level that you're at. You will stay that level, and other cities will thrive.
Yeah, and so I think it's worth mentioning. Yeah, sorry, I just want to clarify. I think it's worth mentioning too that you could be an avid Royals or Chiefs fan, be a season ticket holder, etc., and could have not voted yes on the issue.
For sure.
Simply because the plan that was put together was not a well put together plan, in my opinion.
I didn't really answer your question. Sorry about the tanking.
No. Sorry. You're totally fine, because I think your perspective from Louisville is great. I went to Louisville twice last year for some other stuff that I do, and it's a ghost town, man. It was not a booming metropolis by any means.
But it's a university, and guess what? If you aren't a University of Louisville fan, are you going to Louisville basketball games? Probably not. Let's hope they may play your university that you might root for, but if it's not in the conference, then no. But had they had the Grizzlies or the Hornets, and hey, I get to watch LeBron. Okay, I may stay in the town a little bit longer instead of saying,
and the venue that Louisville basketball plays in is one that could have. I was in it. It's a gorgeous venue, so you could definitely see it holding an NBA team. But the Royals, they were changing their plan the week of the vote. It did not instill confidence in voters.
For sure,
the Chiefs plan. The fact that so many people have asked the question, were they tanking the vote, I think speaks to what the renovation plan was. They were going to add this activation turf field thing. They're going to put a garage band where the Chiefs were. They're going to up the Wi-Fi. They're going to make it so you could walk all the way around the concourse. They're going to have some pedestrian bridges over some of the parking lanes and things like that. But I mean, the plan just didn't inspire confidence in people. So I just always want to bring this back. Like, there are some people, and we talked about politically, this was a very hot button issue. There were some people that, for lack of a better term, Marie Antoinette, they just wanted to eat the rich, right? Like, it didn't matter what you were going to get out of this. They were never going to vote for it. And that's fine. And, for me personally, I had issue with that, but I can understand that. But it's also possible for you to be a very well-educated Royals and Chiefs fan who want this team to stay in Jackson County and not like the plan that's put in place.
Yeah, I think just real quick on the tanking part of it, I think the Chiefs were fine either way. I think the Chiefs were fine. They put money into it. They put money into the advertising for it, into lobbying for it. They'd have been fine if it passed. I think they're fine that it did not pass. I think they were good either way. I don't know that they tanked the vote, but they would have had to be fine with it because, that lease would have been extended. So I also think the activation zone was just a placeholder for a hotel and casino. If Missouri passed gaming, they couldn't put it there because Missouri hadn't legalized gaming yet. So it's an activation zone, which will be active with hotels, restaurants, casinos, a book, something like that.
Yeah, and all these real estate, like these sports teams, they want to become real estate moguls. That's what they want. The plan. Yeah, well, yeah, and he's been very outspoken that hey, I'm good with technology. I'm not good with real estate. That's why I'm getting out. Which that whole thing is interesting too. But the Royals plans, they had office spaces in there, potential apartment living. Some of the plans that they had in the East Village and in Clay County included a power and light style entertainment district with food and restaurant and concert venues. And make no doubt about it, part of this that goes in it with the Chiefs when it comes to going to Kansas is their practice facility too. Because I could see them wanting to do something like the Cowboys have with the Star, where now you've monetized, because, the camp being up in St. Joe, it's unique, it's interesting, it's great for the city of St. Joseph, but there could be a real possibility that the Chiefs are able to monetize both training camp and their games being on the Kansas side and having those two venues be in different parts of the state. So all this plays into this. It's a very complex issue. So Christian, don't feel bad that you don't know all the answers yet.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm learning a lot right now, guys. So I really appreciate it. So you talked about Missouri's kind of plan and paying that sort of pro tax, right? Mm-hmm. What is Missouri's real plan right now as it stands? What are they trying to do to keep the Chiefs in Missouri? And then if the Chiefs don't stay in Missouri, how likely is it that Kansas is going to be the one to pay that pro tax and keep the Chiefs at least somewhat close to Kansas City?
Yeah, I think Kansas is ready to go, and I think the Chiefs are going to need an answer sometime soon because the Star bonds do expire June 1st or July 1st, and so they can be extended for a year. But I don't think there's anybody over at One Arrowhead Drive that wants to go down the road of lobbying to have the vote again in the Kansas legislature to extend it for another year. Because from what I understand, the support that was there a year ago may not fully be there this time because there might be skepticism of, okay, so it's taken you a year to decide, you haven't, are we just a bargaining chip to get a better deal in Missouri? So you're gonna have to convince us that this is good faith, that you guys are really examining on the Kansas side. And so yes, Kansas is ready to go with the Star bonds, and it does not have to be voted on. So it just has to be that the Chiefs find an area. Now, what does have to happen, which if Missouri could get their stuff together and figure it out in the legislature, the problem is the Show Me Sports Investment Act did not even get voted on in the Senate. It got passed in the House, but then the Senate did not vote on it. There were politics involved. There was a bill the Friday before that was bipartisan negotiated that had to do with construction projects around the state. There was a mental health hospital in that bill as well, that those in the Senate worked to come up with that bill and that money that the House didn't even vote on, essentially killing the bill. Come back around the next week, Governor Kehoe and the House, they passed the Show Me Sports Investment Act. There's a lot of people there in the Senate that said, whoa, 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 this is going to be what, $500 million at least? And that was a $500 million construction project across the entire state that we negotiated bipartisan, and you guys just killed it. All the time and effort we put into it, maybe we play obstructionist this week on something that you want until we figure this whole thing out. That's what was going on in Missouri last week as to how it didn't get passed. But they would cover probably, it would be more to me. I mean, it's up to 50% of the project, at least 500 million. So for the Chiefs, it would be 3 billion. For the Royals, it would be 1 billion. So that's why it's at least 500 million, because if you get only the Royals up to 50%, it's $1 billion project. There's 500 million. You get the Chiefs too. Now you're talking about $4 billion. It would cover up to 2 billion. Up to 50%. The difference being, and this is where I think it gets interesting from the Chiefs standpoint, with the Missouri plan, if that gets passed, and then the Kansas plan. So if the Missouri plan gets passed, they also want Jackson County and the city to put in public money. Okay, so that's going to happen. And if that does happen, that would have to be voted on because Jackson County owns the Arrowhead Stadium. Jackson County owns Kaufman. They own the Truman Sports Complex. If the Royals leave, they can go to a stadium that is not county owned. So that may not have to go to a vote. Like Clay County can just say, we're going to build this. It won't be owned by the county. It'll be owned by some other entity. And we can allocate tax dollars there without it going to a vote. So the difference between the Royals and the Chiefs will probably have to be a vote to get it done in Missouri. On the Kansas side, though, they would cover up to 70% of the total cost. So in theory, you say, well, that's $3 billion. So they're going to cover, $2 billion of that, or maybe even a little bit more. The problem is it's Star bonds. So you have to find somebody to invest and purchase that bond up to $2 billion. Well, if you only get $1 billion purchased in Star bonds, Chiefs got to find the other $2 billion somewhere to be able to build that stadium. So it's not as easy as saying, well, Missouri would offer 150 million and Kansas would offer 2-point-something billion. So therefore Kansas is better. Well, Missouri's 150 billion is built in, and the Chiefs don't have to worry about going and getting investments for that and having people buy those bonds. Kansas, you do, but you don't have to vote. Kansas has more space over there to do a lot of things that I think Mark Donovan would like to do. Whereas I'm not sure that Clark Hunt is as on board with Kansas as I do believe Mark Donovan, and the business side is on board with Kansas, because there's the football side, which is clearly Arrowhead, and there's the business side, which to me is clearly Kansas.
Yeah, and something that I think a lot of people will look at this and say is like, well, it clearly makes more sense for the Chiefs and Royals, or one of them, to take the Kansas deal, because they see that nice hefty $2 billion number. And a lot of these sites that aggregate information and stuff are just going to put out that $2 billion number. but people have to realize that that number is no sure thing, and neither is the extension of the star bonds, because those are complicated in themselves. And it took a special session from the Kansas legislature to get the star bonds approved. So from everything I've heard, it's no sure thing that $2 billion number is factual. Or, I shouldn't say factual, is likely. It's something that's achievable.
I don't think it's likely.
Yeah, it's not likely. Now, I will say it has always made more sense. We may have lost Jason. It is very stormy here in Kansas City, as we've mentioned before. So hopefully he will be back and it's not a severe weather issue. Oh, there he is. Okay, good. We're worried about you with the weather. Okay. But yeah, it's not necessarily likely that those star bonds come all the way through. Now, those are a sweet deal, and they have paid off a lot over on that Kansas side with the Kansas Speedway, and some of the other things have been brought over to that part of the state. But it's not a likely thing. And I think one thing that people need to remember too is these areas, they play off of each other, right? If there's business and traffic going to the Kansas side, well, does it make sense to have the Royals in Jackson County, or would they rather go further away to Clay County, basically 2 counties over? So all those things play off of each other. It's a good question, and it's one that's not going to be easy to answer. I like what you said too about where's Clark Hunt's heart at. It's with Lamar and his dad. I think that the fact that the Royals plan or the Chiefs plan centered around staying in Arrowhead Stadium, I think ultimately that's where they would like this to end up. They love the pomp and the circumstance. Even though, and this is where I'll get to the subjective instead of the objective part, Arrowhead was mostly a place filled with heartbreak and sadness until 15 walked through the door, and now it's this hallowed ground for playoff wins. But other than that, it was a place where Lynn Elliott crushed people's dreams. And I think that I think that we can say his name now. They're a dynasty. But I think that they have to look at this and say, what does the Hunt family want, but what's best for business? And if you want to get in the business of having Big 12 championships, SEC championships, the NFL Combine, Taylor Swift, whatever event you can dream of, and a Final Four, think how great it would be to have a Final Four here in Kansas City, a town that's got a ton of college basketball culture in it. All those things are possible on the Kansas side with a dome, with a roof. That's what I think makes the most sense, but I'm not sure that that's what's going to end up happening. Oh, we can't hear Jason. Christian, why don't you go ahead and ask your next question, and we'll see if we can get Jason's audio going again here.
Okay, cool. So, let's see. So let's just talk timeline for a second here, because you guys have brought up how quickly these decisions need to be made. What's the timeline looking like here for like solid, concrete decisions being made? Like, is that a 1 week thing? Is that a 6 months thing? Is that, multiple, maybe a year timeline? How soon do we have to know this information? When do the decisions have to really be made?
So on the timeline, and as I understand it, a lot of this is going to depend on the landing location, right? Like Jason alluded to the fact that if the Royals were to go over to Clay County, that issue wouldn't have to be put in front of voters. That's something that would just happen at the county level. Whereas if the Chiefs put forward a renovation plan in Jackson County, that will go in front of voters again. And then with Kansas, the deadline is the July 1st, essentially. The star bonds, they can be extended, but at the bigger timeline here, the deadline is 2030. Technically, the lease ends in 2031, which would be like kind of smack dab in the middle of the Chiefs season. It should also be noted that they could technically stay beyond there in 2031, but the funding at the county and state level would go away there. So the price would dramatically increase. So hard deadline's 2030. That would essentially, so basically the Royals 21-31 season would be ideally the start of something new. But these projects, to build a new baseball stadium in 4 years would be an extensive process. 5 years is the more likely timeline. And again, going back to the jobs and what this means to the economy, like building these type of venues, they are a massive undertaking that will require lots and lots of manual labor from the city resources. So it's a big pull on a city. I'm not necessarily sure that Kansas City could entirely support 2 stadiums being built in the same county. You know what I mean? So timeline is 2030. How quickly will these decisions be made? That's a little bit tougher to answer. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Mark Donovan, we were at the Super Bowl and I had Mark Donovan on, and he said there is zero plan, zero motivation for them to break the lease. That he said, we will be playing at Arrowhead Stadium throughout the lease. He says, that's not an issue. The Royals will break the lease. The Royals don't want to be there longer than they have to. The Royals would like to be somewhere by 2027. Like that was when they first started talking about moving downtown. They wanted something like 27, at worst 28. Well, now I think best case scenario, if everything works at warp speed, it might be 28, probably 29 at this point for the Royals, which is why they were so disappointed in and why they had more of a sense of urgency than the Chiefs did, because the Chiefs are looking at it and saying, yeah, I mean, we can work out a deal, but we're not planning on breaking the lease. We're fine here at Arrowhead. And they're fine at Arrowhead because, like, again, it's the football side versus the business side. And I do truly believe like the football side is best at Arrowhead Stadium. I mean, you've got the historic, stadium. You've got a place in the NFL that people will view as a tourist site. You've obviously got the loudest outdoor stadium, the history that's there, the home field advantage that's there, that you won't be able to incorporate into a dome. Like whatever the acoustics are for Arrowhead and how they worked, it just works. And there's going to be more of the luxury seats. There'll be, some sort of a bar or a nice, high-end premium seating behind one of the end zones, things like that, to where there'll be more wine cooler fans that'll be there in the dome than what we see at Arrowhead, I think, quite frankly. So from a football standpoint, it's Arrowhead. The business standpoint as to why I think Mark Donovan would be leaning that way is there's so much more area for real estate, for commerce to build around it. Concerts 24/7, any day of the 365. If it's a domed and covered, you can have you can have Taylor Swift in December or January, that you can't have some of those big concerts there at Arrowhead Stadium where you're selling out football stadiums. That would be something you can have. You mentioned the Final Four. They would get a Super Bowl. That's point blank. If the Chiefs built a dome, they would have a Super Bowl in Kansas City. Mark Donovan is on the Super Bowl planning committee, and that is a known fact amongst them. You build a new stadium, if it's covered in an area that is colder, you will get a Super Bowl. And that's something that the Chiefs will get. One thing that I do want to add in that I think the Chiefs are trying to be on the forefront of this in reading where things are going and trying to be one of the first is I brought up to Mark Donovan, the space that's out there. And, my son plays Little League Baseball and they've got all these tournaments and, these, teams coming from out of state, and we got these soccer fields and things like that. And I brought up that, we see, would there be an area to where they would open up, fields, the soccer fields, football fields, baseball fields, to where they can then host tournaments and it would be money into their pocket, and flag football is becoming a huge deal. And Mark Donovan said, well, that's actually something that, is part of this. He goes, Team USA is in the Olympics. Where are they training? They need a training ground. He said, we could have it here. He said the NFL is going to start a flag football league, a professional flag football league. And his response was, why not have a team in Kansas City? And if we have a professional flag football team in Kansas City, where's it going to train and play? It could play right there. We'd have everything set to go. They would have whatever stadium for a professional flag football. Maybe it would be at a dome, and they would train there. And also wanting to be Team USA's flag football training ground here in Kansas City. These are the things that Mark Donovan and the business side are, envisioning, these sugar plums on Christmas Eve. And Clark, I think, is being pulled both ways of understanding the business side, but the emotional attachment with his dad, the emotional attachment with Chiefs fans. I would say, though, that I don't think Clark Hunt is more emotionally attached to Arrowhead than Lamar was to Dallas. And the business move for Lamar was to move from Dallas to Kansas City.
Yeah, and I think, the things you're describing a lot of, what does it sound a lot like? The renaissance and renewal of soccer here in Kansas City. What the Illig family and stuff has done with soccer here in Kansas City, bringing sporting the new park there. As a guy who has a young daughter, like how excited I am that Kansas City is such a mecca for women's soccer. We have the only women's exclusive soccer stadium here in Kansas City, and the riverfront that is just growing with, commerce and all those type of things. Like, All this sounds exactly like that type of plan. And they have their superstars, their teams that have built around that. And right now, this is like, it is literally raining outside, but it's also raining money for the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Because they have the superstars, they have the dynasty, all those type of things. So, just kind of bring it full circle. Like, again, how crazy is it that vote, like if you had asked me 2 or 3 years ago, will a vote pass in Kansas City? My head in the sand would have been like, absolutely, unequivocally, especially if you told me that the Royals also had like a top 3 player in the game right now, and they were making the playoffs. The Royals and Chiefs literally never had a better opportunity on field performance wise for their vote, and it still got rejected by 58%. So I think hopefully, and it sounds like, everything that Mark Donovan has said, Clark Hunt has said, that they listen to that and they're taking that feedback effectively and going to reapply it. But the results are still shocking that they were what they were. So to kind of go back to the timeline thing, Christian, the time is now, right? Like this stuff has to get done sooner than later because, we all envision Bobby Witt Jr., he's a baseball player, by the way, Christian, and Patrick Mahomes doing what they're doing forever. But you just don't know, right? Like, we were just talking about the curses of Arrowhead past. That could be coming sooner than we may realize. So they got to strike while the iron's hot here as far as what the on the field product.
So the longer this goes on, you think it is more leaning towards the Kansas side rather than the Chiefs side? From that's what I'm kind of taking from that. Like based off of the star bonds, based off of the vote, you think the longer this goes on, the more likely they are to move to Kansas?
It's tough. Like to answer that question, that's where, at the beginning of the show, I said like, it's really tough to speak in absolutes or likelihoods with this situation because like everything's on the table. I would, in true Oppenheimer fashion, I would say there's a non-zero chance that the Chiefs or the Royals leave Kansas City. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but you can't say non-zero. But I would say I think the most likely outcome here is one of the teams goes to Kansas and one of the teams stay here in Missouri. I think that the money is there for both teams to do one of those things. Then it just becomes which team goes where. I think that John Sherman has been extremely open about the fact that he envisions downtown baseball. It's what he wants. He came from the Cleveland Guardians organization where they have revitalized their downtown with downtown baseball. But I also think that the plan might be more effective for the Royals to go to the Kansas side because I think the Chiefs have showed where they want to be in Arrowhead. They view that as a mecca of football, tradition, all those type of things. They can do a lot more renovations than what they proposed in their previous plan when they're not tied to the hip with the Royals. So I do think that there is a likelihood that one goes and one stays, unless we see something like the Northland here. Clay County gets involved, and you've got 2 separate counties funding 2 different things. I'm all for it being in Clay County. I'm a Clay County resident, but a Kansas City resident, kind of weird. But that would be awesome for me to have the Royals here on this side of the river. But at the end of the day, I just want to do what's best for both of those stadiums. I want a new Kauffman. I want a new Arrowhead. But if it's going to mean that we're going to lose one of them in the state, that's something that matters to me. And I say that as someone who's lived in Missouri my whole life.
Yeah. I think I think the most what I've felt for a while is that the Chiefs will end up over in Kansas and the Royals will end up in Clay County. We'll see if that's the case. Missouri's going to have to get their stuff together in the legislation. I mean, I know that the Chiefs' first priority was to renovate. There's a part of me that wonders if Clark Hunt was like, hey, we renovate, and if you vote yes, cool. If not, I mean, we kind of gave you the chance to say we wanted to stay in Jackson County. Like we told you we wanted to stay, and you said no. So we're going to Kansas. Like you can't get mad at us for going to Kansas. We tried to stay. You said no. So we're going over to Kansas now. And so there's a little bit of an out there of it's like, pulling on the heartstrings with the Chiefs fans of how can you go to Arrowhead? And if you're the Chiefs, you can say, or not Arrowhead, but how can you go to Kansas? And if you're the Chiefs, you can say, well, we tried to stay at Arrowhead and you said no. And then Missouri couldn't get things together to figure out what their, legislation would be and how much money there would be from, the public part of the investment in the Chiefs. And so Kansas has done it for a year now. They've been ready to go. As soon as the vote went no, Kansas immediately started working on it. And the Royals to Clay County, I think is an interesting one because the Show Me Sports Investment Act specifically said the stadium does not have to be in Jackson County. Like it went out of his way to say not only in Jackson County, any county. And I think there's a reason for that is that the Royals, downtown would be nice, but figuring out a spot for downtown that you can get the approval of the people around. I like the Washington Square site. I think that would be fantastic. Right next to Union Station and Crown Center. I think that would be cool. But for the Royals, if you want to actually have like an expanded, vision, then I think right across the river at Clay County, where you could have an amphitheater, you could have a park, you could do some different things with that. You can have a baseball district where you have some bars and stuff that Atlanta has, the Rangers have, Buffalo is building there with the Bills. That money is a revenue generator outside of the baseball team. But John Sherman has said, and this is where the media would have to hold his feet to the fire. John Sherman has said any revenue from that will go directly back into the baseball team. This is part of us getting a new stadium, is that we will take that baseball district money and put it into payroll. We'll see if that happens. But I think that has more of a chance of coming to fruition if that was in Clay County with more space to really expand the vision.
Yeah, and I think like one thing too to acknowledge about this is what Angry Drunken German said here in the chat, living up to his name. Odds at this point that the Chiefs going to Kansas, Missouri seems likely. That they're fine with me or fine with it pisses me off to no end. These things get really contentious, right? Like this brings out a different side of us. Like at the beginning of this, I said one of my favorite things about sports is how much it touches other subject areas. Sports is culture, sports is politics, it's religion, it's race, it's gender, it's everything. And it touches a lot of different areas. The fact is that this weekend, the Royals celebrated the 1985 and the 2015 championship teams against the Cardinals, the other team in the state, and number 20, which is retired up there in the rafters at Kauffman. The fans were booing Frank White. Why? Because he's a part of the commission or the Jackson County legislator, and he was a staunch naysayer against the stadium plan. So this like goes way beyond our sports fandom for some people, because it does tie in politics, and it can get ugly. It certainly can. And I think the thing that they've got to look at is what is the plan that is going to benefit the state, benefit the counties, and then continue to benefit the teams as well too. Kind of going back to the question of like, what did we want to happen? Look, I understand that people don't like giving billionaires money. But as Jason said, there is a pro tax, and this is the devil. When you crawl into bed with these people who are building these stadiums, these teams, you have to accept the fact that they have the ultimate trump card of, okay, well, we can just go get it from somewhere else. There is no sports franchise that is a depreciating asset. Even the Cleveland Browns still are growing. These are investments that are always making money. So someone will always want them, whether it be the next county over, the next state over, or a city across the way, a different city. So when Jackson County turned down these teams, they gave them the right to do that. And for me, as someone who wasn't able to vote on the issue because I don't live in that county, I was frustrated to see them go. But as a Clay County resident, like I'm very excited about the notion of them coming here and being able to have that. So I don't know, man. Like to me, it's 3/8 of a cent. And I understand like when you add that all up together, but hey, congrats. Your cup of coffee is going to be like 1 cent cheaper in 2031 in Jackson County. And if that's what really matters to you, that's great. I saw some guy saying that he was finally going to be able to afford his car for his wife. I don't know what car he's buying. I don't know if he's looked at interest rates lately, but more power to you. Okay, buddy, because congrats, you fixed it. All those jobs that we were talking about earlier, they're no longer in Jackson County, likely not in Jackson County, but I'm glad that you'll be able to afford that car in 2070 when all that 3/8 cents totals up. Okay, there's my subjective part. Sorry, I told you I was gonna.
I was waiting for more, right? I'll be honest.
I've got an opinion. Okay, well,
Yeah.
Believe me, for every angry tweet that I've sent about this, I've deleted 10. Okay, so I mean it's hard too, right? Like we live in our own world. Sports is so important to us, but for a lot of people, like I've got so many friends that could give a damn. I was explaining to one of my friends about how the NFL draft works. He's like, wait. So they're like really good in college, and then the team just gets to pick them, and they don't get to say no. And I was like, yeah, pretty much. He's like, wow, that's really messed up. Imagine if that was like in real world. I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Like it doesn't matter as much to everyone. The world's a big place. It's a really big place. So we live in our own little sports bubble. So it's a complicated issue for sure.
Yeah, it seems really there's a lot of intricate details that are kind of going into this that I'm now seeing. I mean, we have just a little bit of time left. I got one more question for you guys, and you can keep it as short or we can go as long as we need to. What's kind of the greatest misconception that you see, like the most like fake news, to lack of a better term, that's happening in the media or on these apps? You guys seem like you're really, really into the Discord surrounding this as well. So do you see something like you were talking about the tax price, where it's like, oh, my cup of coffee is going to be twice as expensive now if we have that, 3/8 cent tax on my thing, or now I can buy a new car? Is there that maybe your biggest pet peeve with it, or is there something you would try to get into the heads of people who kind of have no idea what they're talking about?
It's a good question. I will say that like the notion that people are going to see a financial difference in their life from the Jackson County proposition ending is kind of silly, especially whenever you factor in that was money that was only being spent in Jackson County, right? So like I live in Clay County up here. There's a gas station up here. If I go up there and buy a delicious beverage like this, it's not going to be any cheaper because the Chiefs and Royals aren't playing in Jackson County in 2031. It's going to cost the same. That's only in Jackson County. So like for me, I don't necessarily spend a ton of money in Jackson County. A lot of times, honestly, I'm driving across to the state line to do things, or I'm spending my money here in Clay County. So the notion that was going to financially change things for people is kind of silly. And then I will also say that, the villainizing of the billionaires, it's one of those things. I understand it's always going to be popular. It's always going to be trendy because, I mean, hey, they have it, we don't. But the notion that, and this is more at a big level, especially with some of those terrible aggregator accounts on Twitter, that like Clark Hunt or John Sherman were going to take the Chiefs and Royals out of Kansas City. Like there was that thing about them going to San Antonio or Dallas or something. Oh my gosh, just throw up in my mouth. It was never going to happen. It's just so fake outrage, just engagement at the highest level. Like I said, Oppenheimer, 0% chance because you can never say never, but the likelihood of either one of these teams not being in Clay County, Jackson County, Johnson County, or what's the other county where the Speedway is, Jason? I'm not a Kansan. Wyandotte. They're going to be in one of those four places. I would like if I had a lot of money, which I don't, I would gamble it on that fact. Okay, so that's reality to me, and those are the two misconceptions that I feel are the most frustrating about the stadium issue.
Yeah, I think like when I'm looking at this, I think the two misconceptions to me. One is where we're paying for the billionaires. We're giving all this money to billionaires. They are increasing the value of their franchise by having the stadiums, but the money doesn't go into their pocket. It goes to the stadium, and Jackson County owns the Truman Sports Complex. So you're actually giving the money to the workers that are building it, because that's the cost of building it. So you're giving it to whatever company that's actually paying for the goods and the services and to the construction project. What you are giving, though, is added value for the franchise to the owners if they were to sell, because the added value of that stadium. So that's one part to it, is like, well, my tax dollars are going to the billionaires. They're actually not. Your tax dollars are going for upkeep of the stadium and to build the stadium or pay for renovations to the stadium, which goes to construction workers, the companies, the things like that you can choose to do locally. And the other misconception that I think is frustrating on the flip side is the fear mongering. Like, I hate that. I don't believe the Royals and Chiefs are going anywhere. And for there to be any of the, well, if you don't vote for this, we're leaving. Like, I hate that.
Yeah, I understand. Like it's oh my goodness, Jason, you're on the side now.
He's rotating. It pisses him off so much that he's just gonna flip upside down. Yeah, but I mean, I totally get what Jason's saying about the fear mongering and they're like trying to leverage our fandoms basically against us and how all this is going to work. And someone put this in the chat here. Samuel said, how do the fellows feel about the Hunt funding their own stadium? Rams owner coughed it up. That's a really unique situation because that stadium houses two teams, right? That's more than just the Rams. It's also the Chargers, and also like moving that team over there to LA where there's so much more capital to be had there, a very unique situation. So I don't necessarily think that that's something that's likely.
Oh yeah. And why would you pay? I mean, like it's take it into your own lives, right? Like, why would you pay for half of a new house if you could say, somebody has to pay for the other half of this, or I'm just going to move somewhere else because everybody wants to be around me. Everybody wants to, me to be in the area. It's like you're taking advantage of that 100 times over. So to me, it's less of an efficacy problem with the owner and more of, just bureaucracy and red tape and trying to get stuff down and explain to the taxpayers, because the way you guys have explained it to me today, it's like it's really just, would you rather have them in Missouri or Kansas? And I think a majority of Missourians would say, yes, we'd like both of our pro teams to stay in Missouri.
Yeah, and I do think that because this kind of happened with Union Station, where actually, because it's so close to the state line, Missouri and Kansas did like a shared tax plan for the renovations of Union Station. I do think that some people have been like proponents of the plan, or naysayers of the plan have said like, hey, there's a lot of Johnson County Chiefs fans out there. There's a lot of fans on the Kansas side of the Royals. Both these states should shoulder these two teams. So I would also say, like, as a Missourian, I have no problem with one of these teams going over to the Missouri side, because we are where we are now. We've already lost the privilege of like just exclusively keeping them to negotiate with Jackson County. So at this point now, it's what's best for the team. I continue to think the best thing for the Chiefs is for them to go to Kansas and build that beautiful stadium that's there, because of all the benefits that can come from, in addition to what it would be like to go out there. Like, there's people who lost fingers and toes during the Dolphins playoff game a couple years. It'd be kind of cool to go to a game in January and it be a nice balmy 77 in there. And I do think that a new dome state Arrowhead could be just as loud or louder than Arrowhead is right now. What would Arrowhead be afterwards? Like, how eerie would it be to have an empty Truman Sports Complex with neither team there? That would be something that I've not really thought about. Like, what would that space be? All I can tell you is sitting there and watching a game at the K and seeing them hit home runs into the night sky with a Best Western in the background and a burnt down IHOP isn't exactly like the most romantic thing possible. So I do think I do think truly that what's best for the team might not be what's best for our fandom. And I know that there's some people who are just like super against ever leaving Arrowhead. Oh, you just can't leave there. It's a sacred space, the tailgating. They can do all that stuff in a new spot. You will find a new way to call this place home, especially if it's going to be state of the art, cutting edge, and going to bring more funding to it, right? Like right now, 2/3 or half of the AFC West is all dome teams. Patrick Mahomes has lost one game in his career in a dome stadium, and that was the last one he played in New Orleans, unfortunately. So Patrick Mahomes is real. You build a dome in Kansas, boom, that's an advantage. I understand that it's fun to have the Dolphins come here and look like they want to go home the minute that they hit the field, but also, like I said, people were losing toes. I've seen some complaints talking about the turf here. They have all these different ways. I know that the turf was a mess because it was real grass in that Super Bowl in Arizona, but they can do those sort of things too, where they're growing the grass or whatever and wheel it in and wheel it out. I think that they would probably do what's best for player safety there. So it's a very complex issue. We've talked a lot about it. We're having an issue getting Jason back on here. Like I said, the weather here in Kansas City, it's not cooperating very well. So everyone do stay safe and do check out Sports Radio 810 every day, 10 to 2. Jason Anderson, The Zone with Sterling Holmes. Great show. I was fortunate enough to go on the show a couple times during the draft season, talk with them. You can listen on the Sports Radio 10 app. You can listen anywhere you get your podcast, or just, turn on that dial. Turn the dial to 810. What are you doing? That's where my preset is when I get in the car. So make sure your preset is set there too. Christian, I think we're going to call this a show. My son has come downstairs to inform me that it's raining. I had no idea. But Dad, it's raining. And when I went outside, I got wet. And the bear, he calls thunder bears, the bears outside. So I think this might be our sign to call it a show. We got through without any tornadoes. I was hoping to podcast through a tornado. I watched the movie Twisters yesterday, which is a poor choice. My wife, she's afraid of storms, so now she's even more psyched out. But it's a good movie. Do recommend it. But guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, did you know that the Arrowhead Addict YouTube channel hit 55,000 subscribers last week? Really great time to do it during the schedule release. The only way is up here. We've got a show every single day of the week. This is one of the few places that's going to be talking Chiefs every day, every week throughout the whole off season. So while you're clinging to any morsel of Chiefs news, we're going to be bringing it to you week around, except for next Monday. There will not be a show next Monday for us because it will be Memorial Day. So get outside, enjoy the time with your family, enjoy remembering why we celebrate that holiday and the many people who have given so much to this country. That's going to be it for us today. Thanks for helping us cover this big issue. Special thanks to Jason. Special thanks to Richard, who has been like spinning plates with tornadoes and guests and everything for us today. We do appreciate it, sir. Make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, go Chiefs.